Hello guys and welcome back to another video on Lawgics. Now today we're not looking at a case, but we're interviewing a real lawyer. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Hello, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Preethi. I'm right now a master's student at Columbia Law School. I used to be a practicing lawyer in India. I finished law school in India in 2016. I've been practicing for about 8 years since then. For a year in between, I was a law clerk at the Indian Supreme Court, and after which I used to basically litigate back home. Then I decided I wanted to study a little more, which is why I came to Columbia last fall to do my master's, and I'll be graduating this summer.
Okay, so you're graduating this summer.
Yeah.
Now before you graduate, what brought you into law? Like what got you into it and who got you into it?
Okay. Um. So, uh, so back home in India, for us, the system's a little different. We need to make a decision in terms of what career we want to go to as soon as we finish 12th standard. At that point in time, people, write different entrances if you want to go to medical school, if you want to become an engineer. And similarly, if you want to do law, you need to write a different set of exams. Um, I I think most students end up picking between engineering or medicine, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do either of that. So I was just looking around
Stop.
trying to see.
Hold up. If you did not understand what happened up to this point, do not worry. I'll give you a brief 30-second description. Basically, she was explaining her process of coming to America for law from India and how law is different there compared to what it is here. She's talking about exams, what a lot of other Indians would go into, and things like that. This first part is mainly for people who are planning to pursue law or maybe thinking about it as their future. So that's basically what this first part is explaining. And without further ado, I'll get
So I
back
was
in the
just looking
video.
around trying to see what are the other like things on offer. And the course that I ended up doing, the law school that I went to, I really liked the program. So it's a 5 year program that I did, and I majored both in the arts and the law. And the idea of the universities, these law universities, they're called national law universities. The idea is that you study humanities along with the law so that you become like a holistic lawyer. You learn some sociology, some political science, some history, so that it gives you context to the legal system.
Okay, so before we get any, before we move forward, for people who are watching this and they don't understand two terms, what does 12th standard mean?
Yeah.
Like, what does standard mean?
It's basically grade. So, like, what you would call grades in the US is what we refer to as standards back in India. You know how in here you tend to go to college first, and then you decide your major, and then you decide if you want to go to medical school, if you want to go to law school. We sort of need to make that decision a little earlier. We need to make it right out of high school.
Okay, so that's basically what standards are, and you just make the decision right away.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So, my website, Lawgics, is basically just law and ethics combined, and how sometimes they clash between each other, sometimes they work together, and sometimes they just go their own ways. Now, in any of the things you've studied, how has ethics come into that?
That's actually a really interesting question, and I think ethics plays sort of like a very important role in a lawyer's life. It's something that you almost need to think about on a day to day basis. So, in terms of your curriculum, ethics is taught to you as a subject. So, it's a course that you end up taking some point in law school, like you have to do it. Similarly, as part of my master's program as well, because I want to sit for the bar exam, uh, I did an ethics course this time. And they teach you different sorts of ideas, like, say, for example, when someone becomes your client, what sort of duties do you owe them? What sort of decisions do you need to make if there are conflicts between clients? And there are certain like fundamental ideas that you're taught, so that at least you have some basic guidance in terms of how to think about these things. But more particularly, I think in your day to day life, it's honestly something that comes up a lot. And I think it's, you sort of learn how to get better with it over time, because I don't think there's like a simple answer to a lot of ethical questions that you face as a lawyer. So you learn from your peers, you ask questions to your seniors, and then you try and like get to the best possible answer that you can think of.
So, speaking of best possible answers you can think of, for you guys who are watching, another way to think of this is like the trolley problem.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
So, basically, the trolley problem is um, you're working a trolley or you're a bystander on the trolley and you have to control the switch. But on one side, there's one person who's tied down, on the other, there's five people. Now, there's many variations to this, and it's a hypothetical, it's like a rhetorical question, and nobody really, there's no specific answer. So, on that note, how do you, how do you see yourself as a lawyer in ethics and law based?
um, so that's actually a very difficult question, and I don't know if I have a clear answer to that, um, because I think it's honestly something that changes for me as I grow as a lawyer as well. But maybe today, if you were to ask me ethically what sort of lawyer I'd like to be, I think for me, two things are very important. One thing is how I treat the lawyer on the other side, in terms of fairness, say in court, fairness when I'm having a conversation. So that's very important to me in terms of what sort of information we give and take from each other, and to make sure that the lawyer on the other side is also treated fairly. That's one aspect of my um, thinking of ethics currently that's particularly important to me. Another thing in terms of like the clients that I try and work with. So most of my work has been with large companies. Is the kind of like work that I've tended to do. I think for me as a lawyer, I'd like to now sort of try and represent different sorts of clients, especially those who typically don't have access to the law very easily. Because I'm sure you know already with like the reading that you've been doing that it's a very complex system. It's not easy for everyone to navigate. So I think for me, going forward as a lawyer, I'd like to like try and work with getting access to different kinds of people to the law.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. So, right now you're in Colombia, right?
Yeah.
And you're about to graduate. How does that process go? Like, what are your next steps for like lawyers or just you in general?
So typically, for you to practice law in any jurisdiction in the world, you need to get yourself a license. And to be able to get the license, more often than not, you need a law degree. And then after you get the law degree, you need to write a bar exam. Um, for us back in India, we have a national level bar exam. So everyone writes the same all India bar examination, after which you get a license and then you can practice as a lawyer. In the US, of course, because there are different federal and state systems, you need to get yourself licensed at different states. I'm sitting for the New York bar this summer, for which I'm going to hopefully prepare soon. But yeah, once you get yourself a license, you're legally a lawyer, and then you can then you can go out and do what you want.
All right. So far you're about to graduate. Next step is to take the bar exam for New York because there's different exams for each state.
That's right.
Unlike India, where you're from, it's just one test for everywhere,
Yeah.
right? So now going back into like the path of a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things to look out for people who want to become a lawyer or just interested in that field?
Uh, okay. So I think the one thing that I would definitely say, as a lawyer, there is a lot of reading, um, like humongous amounts of reading that you need to do, and there's a lot of writing as well. So I think if you're thinking of law school, um, yeah, yeah. So I'm hesitating a little because like people typically think of lawyers as being very argumentative, or if you're good at debates, people like, oh, you should go to law school. Or if you're someone who talks a lot at home, fights a lot at home. But I don't know if that's necessarily the right metric, because I'm personally a fairly quiet person, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy being a lawyer. But if you were seriously thinking about law school, I would say that if you're someone who enjoys problem solving, because that's what a lot of my job is. Someone will come and tell you that, hey, I had a road accident yesterday, or hey, like my neighbor's trees are falling into my yard. So you have a fact scenario in front of you, and then you need to think about how a legal principle would apply to that. So if you're someone who enjoys critical thinking, if you're someone who enjoys problem solving, if you're someone who enjoys being innovative, because often, like, especially if you're in court, you need to come up with five different kinds of arguments, because you never know what will convince a judge, right? You never know, because not all judges are the same. You need to think of like different ways to be persuasive. So yeah, and definitely if you're someone who enjoys reading, I think you should think about law school.
So those are the things you should look out for becoming a lawyer. Um, Coming back to your present
Mm-hmm.
in ethics, do you in your courses do you study cases?
Yeah. So just to give you some context, generally in the world, there are broadly two kinds of legal systems, what is called a common law system and a civil law system. There's, of course, some nuances in some systems that are a mix of both, but very broadly, if we were to understand. So, a civil law system is something that's more typically based on written rules. So, there will be extensive, detailed rules that are written and that are then applied. So that's generally then the lawyer's job will have to become understanding those rules very, very well. Whereas a common law system is what is usually referred to as a judge made system, wherein courts issue judgments, issue decisions, and then the system is based upon following those judgments. So, say for example, 10 years ago a judge ruled a particular way on a set of facts, then today we need to follow that same decision. So the US is a common law system. India is a mixed system but tends to be more of a common law system, which is why, as lawyers, we're predominantly trained on what is called the case law method. So you need to learn cases very, very well. The primary mode of teaching is a case itself. You learn the facts, you learn why a particular decision, you know were it reached the conclusion that it did. And then, so going forward, if you see the same set of the facts, you need to apply that older judgment.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. Now, on ethics,
Mm-hmm.
you said that you're taking ethics classes
Yeah.
for this law.
Yeah.
Was there ever a case that had a strict clash between law and ethics? And if so, like, can you explain it for us?
uh,
Like a general overview. It doesn't have to be so in depth.
yeah.
Just like a quick 2 sentence summary of that.
Mm-hmm. uh, yeah, I think it does. I think it's very sort of, it's not an uncommon conflict that happens between the law and the between law and ethics, especially because the law a lot of times tends to be acontextual, like it is written for everyone, whereas the facts in front of you tend to be specific to who that person is, where they're coming from, what their background is, what their context is. So yeah, it's an issue that does tend to come up fairly often, and uh, I think as you grow as a lawyer, your answer will change to that as well, because some people tend to be very hardline thinkers in terms of the fact that the law needs to prevail always, even if ethically the conclusion should be something else. Actually, now that as I'm talking about it, I can remember like an example a few years ago in India that came up. Say, for example, traditionally in some states of India during some festivals, they tend to involve animals. And there are some sports that involve animals, and it's a big part of like the celebration of that particular culture. Whereas, of course, like a lot of animal rights organizations used to think that like it's fine if your culture is that way, but it's animal cruelty sometimes because you're forcing them to participate in games, you're forcing animals to compete against each other. So, and this was an issue that went up to the Supreme Court. Like, so then how do you decide, right? Because the law might be clear, the law might say that, okay, you can't ill treat, you can't mistreat animals, but ethically, if you were to say, think about it, think about the take into the context, take into the local culture, then the answer might be different. So yeah, it's an issue that comes up a lot.
All right, so those are basically all my questions with it. So, do you have any questions about Lawgics or Lawgics? Do
Yeah,
you have any questions?
yeah, I do. I'm curious to know, because I know you've made some videos and you've been reading about cases. What do you think? Number one, how have you seen law and ethics conflict? And number two, like s- based on what you've seen, what you've read, what do you think is a way to resolve the conflict?
So, for the first question was like, how do you see the wait? So, the first question was like,
Do you
what do you pick?
no, like what sort of conflicts have you seen?
Okay, so there was one case where there was there was a town in Niagara Falls,
Mm-hmm.
and that town was being used right like a company bought that school land and used it for various things, and that town was affected by contaminated water
Hmm.
and it was dying, right? Legally, because the school like signed the contract, they were in the clear,
Mm-hmm.
but ethically that was wrong. And what was really inspiring was a local mom stood up as an activist, brought this case to the court, and won.
Okay.
So that completely influenced this thing, and now new laws have been created based on that one case.
That's interesting.
What was the second question again?
The second question is, when you see law and ethics conflict, what do you think is the right answer? Like, how do you decide which should win?
So that's interesting because I think ethics can be manipulated in many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And like the law can also have many loopholes. So it matters on the case, but let's say the Brown versus Board of Education case, that's a huge one.
Yeah.
That is one that I recorded as well. Um there were loopholes,
Yeah.
right? Like the schools, private schools, they segregated them,
Yeah.
but it was
Which
legal.
was legal
It
at
was
that
legal
point,
back
yeah.
then, but it wasn't ethical.
Yeah.
And the legal part was technically like a loophole,
Yeah.
a constant loophole, until they finally put a stop to it and brought it to the Supreme Court. But and ethics, it can also be like that. Like some people can say this is right
Mm-hmm.
because it can help us,
Yeah.
right? So I think the way to resolve a case that has a clash,
Mm-hmm.
you got to get some context on the past before the present, I feel like.
Okay.
So I read on cases that are somewhat similar,
Mm-hmm.
not entirely, but other cases that have a clash, and I see how those are resolved and what the court usually
And what
picks.
lessons we can take from that and
Yeah.
then apply. Yeah.
And then you can finally, sometimes you can untie that loophole
Yeah.
in law or if
Yeah.
it's ethics, and then you can resolve the case.
Yeah, that's basically what we do in law school.
Yeah. So usually when I'm doing this, I used to be sided with ethics because I did take ethics like club
In
this
school?
year in school, and I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
But after reading upon on each law, on each case, I was slowly siding with the law until I became perfectly balanced
Okay.
because they're both there's no right or wrong. I feel like
Yeah.
it's about the side, like the context of each side,
Hmm.
and that's why I like make these cases and these videos.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions?
No, I think that's it.
All right. So with that, this video has come to end. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to go to our website and put your opinions on our discussion forum, or just comment on YouTube down below, and I'll see you in the next one.